Is the old school M16 style rifle still applicable today? Can you fight with it? Let's talk about that. Welcome to the Patriot Training YouTube channel. My name is Clay Howell. I'm the owner and head firearms instructor at Patriot Training. The topic of today's video is the old M16 style A2, A4 rifle. Can you fight with it? Can you be effective? And more importantly, what advantages and disadvantages does it bring to the table? For starters, if I had to go to war today and I didn't have a lot of details as to who my enemy would be, what the combat theater would look like, those sort of things, I would probably pick up my Block 2-ish clone, and that would probably be my primary weapon. Close, however, very close behind that, would be my A4 modified rifle. This rifle is Addy. Addy is a 20-inch rifle. Started as an M16 A4 clone, but with certain modifications to improve performance. First of all, we have a J-type compensator to mitigate what little recoil she already has. Free float handguard from Midwest Industries, along with some grippy covers so that I can get really good grip on the rifle. We have an ACOG instead of the correct TA31. This is a TA01 because I prefer the crosshairs for work. And of course, the A4 style Matek backup iron sights. See, I got a little bit of personalization on the A2 stock here. There's also a BCM grip for a slightly different angle that I really enjoy, really appreciate. Plus it's a larger hand grip so that I can get my big old meat hook on there. And last but not least, we have an RLS type sling, which is measured up for me for patrolling. I can still ready up from here, and also I can loop up using this sling. That's Addy. Why would someone even consider the modern musket? Well, for starters, the rifle length barrel, 20 full inches. That means your rounds are leaving the muzzle at incredible velocities. Standard 55 grain ammunition usually chronographs at or around 3,200 feet per second from the muzzle of these rifles. Carbines simply can't produce that kind of velocity. And when you're talking about the AR-15 and you're talking about a smaller projectile, speed is what kills. Many people think of the old school full-length rifle, and the first thing that comes to mind is target shooting, or maybe some kind of a competition like NRA high power, or maybe just the old school kind of combat like we saw in the old movies, or maybe somebody actually saw it, you know, like Vietnam War, that sort of thing. And without a doubt, these are valid applications of the full-length rifle. And, you know, between the M16, the A2, the A4, the platform has served us in that full-length configuration for many, many years, over 50 years. And, you know, sure, it has some pros and some cons, but it did very well. Thank you very much. One perceived drawback for the long rifle is when it is used by shorter individuals. You will hear people talk about length of pull. The original A1 buttstock was designed for a shooter with an average height of 5'7", and the newer A2 stock is 5/8 of an inch longer, so maybe it's designed for a shooter of an average height of 5'8". And we've got to understand, when the term average is used, it means that there are a fair number of shooters who would be shorter than that, below that average, as well as the folks like me who would be taller than that average. I have a friend who runs an A2 stock, and he's 5'7", and he has no issues whatsoever running the rifle. My son, when he was in middle school, he was about 5'5" at the time. He, at that point in time, absolutely loved shooting the longer rifle, and he had no issues with fitment at that point in time at all. These days he's in college and he's well over 6 feet tall, and so the rifle looks more appropriate in his hands. And to be fair, he would have me tell you that he prefers his carbine length stock and rifle, but he still enjoys shooting the old sweetness, that's for sure. If we are going old school, let's see some applications from the old school. If we go old school, what considerations would have to be made? That's a good question, because if the M16 full-length rifle were optimal, then our military would still be using it. First, modern gunfighting doctrine teaches a squared stance when gunfighting. With a full-length stock and iron sights or an ACOG or scope, this is simply not possible. One must have a bladed stance in order to use the sights. The collapsible stock of the M4 and most of your modern AR-15 models allows for that squared body position regardless of what kind of sighting apparatus you use. So let's dig a little deeper here. Why square up? Well, this all has to do with recoil management. Certainly a bladed posture is going to be more akin to a natural point of aim. It's going to be more conducive to settling into a position with minimal muscular input and making a more precise shot. However, squaring up is taught because it helps mitigate recoil, which helps you get more shots on target in less time. Recoil management. Recoil tends to find the path of least resistance. So if you square up behind a rifle, there are just simply not many lanes for that recoil to escape and slip out from. That way, if you're squared up properly, with very modest rearward pressure applied with your forward hand, and very modest forward pressure applied by your hips through your shoulder, the recoil is mostly mitigated and goes straight back. This is important because it makes follow-up shots so much easier, and your sights don't wander very far off target at all. Makes things like double taps and Mozambiques and those sorts of drills very, very easy and very quick. With a bladed position, the recoil from a shot taken standing from your typical right-handed shooter is going to go up and to the right. That's because it's a more difficult position to brace from, and the force of the recoil escapes the path of least resistance, which happens to be up and over that right shoulder. With all that said about recoil, the full-length rifle with a full-length buttstock usually has a rifle-length buffer and a rifle-length buffer tube, and this helps to mitigate recoil. Additionally, the 20-inch barrel most often has a rifle-length gas tube. This further helps to mitigate recoil. Every full-size 20-inch AR that I have is a very soft shooting gun because of these factors. It also weighs just a little bit more, maybe a pound more than an M4 style rifle. So that little bit of added weight also helps to soften the recoil as well. In this video, you can see that as I roll my shoulder up and into the stock, even from the bladed position, the same way I roll that shoulder up when I'm squared, it will help reduce that recoil and allow fewer avenues of escape for that recoil, so it will nudge me straight back. If I do not roll my shoulder up, the result is recoil that is noticeably different from that of the carbine when I do so. If we are going old school, let's see some applications from the old school rifle. But if I'm going to show you some of this rifle, it's got a lot of old school, and so I think we need to go a little bit more old school, and this just isn't quite enough. Better. Yeah, that's it. But if I'm going to go old school with the rifle, the rest of me has got to be old school too. This just won't cut it. Better. Let's see if we can make it perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's check it out. Let's shoot this gun. The next consideration for the full-length rifle is that of CQB, close quarters battle. Room clearing. Make no mistakes, room clearing has been done by the United States Marine Corps with a full-length A2 or A4 style rifle for many, many years. Only recently have they started phasing that out in favor of a carbine length platform. The vast majority of the global war on terror, Marines were doing room clearing with the full-blown guns. That does not mean the platform is ideal. That means it can be done. That said, if you utilize a limited entry method instead of a dynamic entry, the downfall of the longer barrel is somewhat mitigated. It becomes a little bit easier to sweep your corners when you're using a limited entry versus running into the room foolishly. As we talk about CQB, I would be remiss if I did not remind you, as a civilian, the odds of us using CQB are very minimal, and even in bad circumstances, we should really, really try to avoid it. Outside of, countering a home invasion, there are very, very, very few circumstances in which I would imagine a civilian would ever need to do CQB. And many people say, well, what if we're attacked? What if, the world goes to hell in a handbasket? What if the excrement hits the oscillator? And I say, even then, civilians need to stay away from doing CQB. It's just not what we need to be doing. So, make no mistake, you need CQB skills as a civilian, and you need to also realize that the circumstances in which those would be used is very, very limited. If I'm doing CQB as a civilian, then I am probably either desperate or have made several major errors in judgment. The final potential disadvantage is the need for a special adapter to run a modern Vickers style 2-point sling or something similar. And because the adapter is not hard to find and it's not very expensive, it's less than $20 here in 2024. So this potential disadvantage is minimal at best. When you're fighting out in the open, that's where the longer rifle really shines. The greater velocity from the longer barrel means that you can reach out and touch someone more effectively at a greater distance. When comparing, say for example, 55 grain offerings, the velocity from the 20-inch barrel at 100 yards is greater than that out of the muzzle of the 12-inch or pistol-sized barrel, and it's only slightly behind the muzzle velocity of the 16-inch barrel. So you have about a 50-yard advantage on the 16-inch barrel, and you have about a 150-yard advantage on the 12-inch barrel. So some of your more common AR offerings, they really come up short when it comes to that velocity, pun intended, and that 20-inch barrel gives you between a 50-yard to about a 150-yard advantage, just depending on what your buddy is shooting. Since the rifle keeps 55 grain ammunition at or above fragmentation velocity out to nearly 200 yards, it is logical to pair the rifle with a scope of some sort. I've seen people run these with LPVOs, and that's fine and dandy. I really like running an ACOG on the A2 or A4 style rifle. It's almost like it was built for that. With a little bit of practice, the ACOG can be extremely effective at close ranges. That said, the low power fixed scope with the ballistic drop compensator reticle, the BDC reticle, really shines from 50 to 400 yards and beyond, just depending on the ammunition you're choosing. So again, when you're out in the open, it's much more of an ideal platform for that kind of fighting. The Marine Corps figured this out about the scope use, and they did that kind of early on, and they adopted the ACOG during the early years of the global war on terror. For its length, the 20-inch rifle is not terribly heavy unless it's outfitted with a heavy barrel. It is also very well balanced in my estimation, which leads to my next point. Using a bladed position in standing is one thing, but using that bladed position in kneeling, sitting, and prone is another thing. The blading allows for more of a natural point of aim, which leads to more accuracy with less effort. It's very common. I can bring a shooter up to speed very quickly with exceptional accuracy right out of the gate, even if they have little or no prior knowledge, if I give them a slightly bladed posture, especially in prone. Just simply because it's almost as if the rifle was engineered to shoot that way and be accurate. For me, this rifle just feels right in the different shooting positions. Recoil is minimal, and one can easily perform ready-ups, double taps, and all the standard drills and routines. And you can shoot it with a traditional sling or the more modern Magpul RLS sling, either one, and, you know, practice your marksmanship that way as well. With all that said, the full-length buttstock usually has a rifle-length buffer tube, a rifle-length buffer, and a rifle-length gas tube. And that combines to help further reduce recoil. So the 20-inch guns tend to be very soft shooting. You take that soft shooting gun, and what I find is that with a little bit of downward pressure and a little bit of left pressure, with my forward hand, my offhand, tends to quell what little recoil is left. That, and I roll my shoulder into the rifle, much like I do when I'm squared, and the avenues of recoil escape just tend to go away and be mitigated. So I find that I can double tap and do other fast type shooting just as well with the rifle as I can with a carbine in a fully squared stance. And the reason is because I know where that recoil is going to go, and I adapt my grip and my body positioning to help counter that. In conclusion, although an A2 or A4 style rifle would not be my first pick for myself in a SHTF situation, or for you, I would not recommend it as a first pick. However, I definitely would recommend it. What's the caveats? Well, you have to understand, as with any rifle, and as a shooter, you must understand the inherent strengths and weaknesses of the platform, as well as your own personal strengths and weaknesses. And you must train what you suck at. That means if your platform has a known weakness, you must train to overcome that as well. Make sure you take good training classes from reputable instructors, and while there's something to be learned from the instructor who's hardcore and it must be done this way, there's a lot that can be learned there. Be mindful of that as well. That kind of an instructor may not have the depth and the breadth of knowledge and understanding and experience to help you with the longer rifle and help make it work for you. If they're telling you to square up regardless of that longer stock and regardless of the scope, then maybe they just don't have the depth of knowledge and experience to help you maximize the use of the platform. And that's okay. I'm not dissing those instructors at all. They're doing what they were taught to do, but it doesn't work on every platform. And I'm reminded of a situation where I was in a class and it was a scoped rifle class, and most of us had collapsible stocks, and one gentleman brought a hunting rifle. And that was well within the realm of what he was permitted to bring according to the course syllabus. However, the first thing the instructor did, because he was a wise instructor, he said, okay, you're going to have to blade your body a little bit because you have a longer length of pull. And so the first thing this instructor did was go ahead and modify that body position to help overcome the factors, the real factors that the rifle presented. And in fact, much later in the class, we saw how he was using bag support and things of that sort to help mitigate the recoil as best as possible. Of course, it was a 30-06, so there's no way you're going to take away all the recoil on that rifle. But he had that student mitigating the recoil as best as could be done with a lightweight hunting rifle, and he had him doing it very, very quickly into the class. So that's definitely the kind of instructor you need to train with. So yeah, meld it with your body style. Remember, your modern musket is always welcome at Patriot Training. Myself and the instructors on staff, we know exactly how to make the body mechanics work for you and your rifle. So, you're not going to be left out if you bring an A2 or A4 style rifle onto the line. You will be welcome. You're going to have fun, and we're going to show you how to really get all of the juice out of that squeeze for sure. Well, that about wraps it up. I would encourage you to hit like, hit subscribe, and click that notification bell so that you can be reminded when a new Patriot Training video drops. Leave me a comment. Did I miss something? Did I leave something out? Do you feel there's another point worth making? Do you think I'm totally wrong? Put it in the comments. Let's see what you have to say. Back it up with some facts, with some proof, not just I did or I saw. Tell me about it. Tell me more. I really like to hear that, and as any good scientist, I'm always welcome and open to changing my mind. I'm welcome to new data at all times. So, help me understand it. Do I have it totally wrong if I do? And that said, I must remind you that you don't have to be a patriot to train, but you do have to train if you want to be a patriot. Take care.